Hello again. When I spoke yesterday about Egypt and the Fertile Crescent, it wasn't merely in an abstract sense, as in things that I'd read about in books or anything like that. I spent a good part of my life in that area of the world, along the eastern Mediterranean, Egypt, and so on, right up into Anatolia, Syria. I've always been fascinated, I was then and I still am, about the way that it's a kind of crossroads for the world. It's the first humans that left Africa passed through there. Obviously, they crossed the Sinai Desert and moved up through Israel into Europe and Asia. Um, just to show, by the way, that I wasn't always an old guy with a pedantic voice. This is me in 1977 in Syria. It was during the Lebanese Civil War. Thinking now about different ethnicities in the area, which I talked a little about yesterday and annoyed many people by doing so, um, I spent a year living near this place, which is called Tel Abadia. Tel Abadia is interesting for two reasons. Well, a good deal more than two, actually. It lies on the bank of the Jordan, just south of the Kinneret, which is it's a lake. It's what the English call it, the Sea of Galilee, I think. It's a site where traces of some of the first humans to leave Africa have been found, Homo erectus. And in this particular site, on the below Tel Abadia, the remains date back as far as 1.5 million years, which is very early indeed. Those Homo erectus must have crossed through Egypt. They must have moved up from Africa, East Africa, through Egypt, along the Sinai, and moved towards Europe via Tel Abadia. Tel Abadia, a tell, by the way, it's an archaeological mound where people live for a long time. They start building on top of the previous inhabitants, and it builds up into what the Arabs called a tell. I don't know what the English word is for this. What's intriguing about Tel Abadia is that it was a very important crossroads. Okay, it was inhabited 1.5 million years ago by Homo erectus. Later on, there was a walled city there, a Bronze Age city. It guarded crossing of the Jordan and also the road leading from the Golan Heights, which is a plateau near Syria. It was of great strategic importance. There's it's possibly the site of biblical site as well. Those of you that are familiar with scripture and the story of Saul will know that after his death, Saul's body was hung on the walls of Bet Shan, and Bet Shan is another tell. Tel Bet Shan is just a little bit south of Tel Abadia, just to give you some idea of where we're talking about here. What is interesting is that until 1948 there was a village on top of the tell, and it was a village consisting entirely of black people. Simple as that. A black village. As far as anyone could tell, they were black Africans. No one seemed to know how they got there or how long they'd lived in that area. They were simply there. They were the people that lived on Abadia now. I often wished I could have found out their story, because it's possible that that site has been inhabited continuously for 1.5 million years, which is a very, very interesting thought indeed. Still thinking of ethnicity, which we were talking about yesterday, I lived also in the Sinai Desert for a while, having quite a few dealings with the Bedouin who lived there. The Bedouin regard themselves as the true Arabs. They are slightly contemptuous of the city Arabs. There's an old saying that Allah created the camel and the Bedouin, and then from the camel's dung he made the city Arab. That's what the Bedouins say anyway, so don't take offence. I'm only relaying what I've heard from other sources. Something curious that I did find was that the Bedouin were much, much darker than the people living in Jordan and Syria. A lot of the Arabs living in, say, about Amman, the capital of Jordan, almost completely white. They could pass for Europeans. The Bedouin of the Sinai and the Negev, nothing like that at all. They're very dark skinned. They're more, they look more like Indians, people from South Asia. However, looking at them, they don't look to me like as though they're mixed heritage, Arab and black African. It's rather curious to explain, but again, I never really found out anything about that. At that time, the Sinai was very, very wild. I mean, there were leopards and hyenas living there. It was before the tourists came. Anyway, there's no real point at all to this video. It's simply my ramblings. Just that whenever I talk about that area, whenever I talk about Israel and Egypt and Turkey, Syria, Jordan and so on, it's not something just that I know from books. It's something that's very close to my heart. It's something that matters to me.